Chapter 7. Pollen Gets a Ride. A storm cloud hung over Zoe's head, despite the warm, welcoming smell of oatmeal cookies that met her when she came into the kitchen. She threw herself into the chair and sighed. Auntie pulled up another chair, draped an arm around her shoulders, and pulled her into a hug. "Hey, are you okay? Did something happen at school today?" Zoe shrugged. Auntie waited. Soon, she softened into the comfort of Auntie's hug. "Mrs. Thomas forgot to put me on a team. Again." Zoe had a hard time at school. She didn't speak very often and mostly kept to herself. Sometimes it seemed like the other children didn't even notice she was there. Sadly, the children weren't the only ones. She told her auntie how today Mrs. Thomas read off the teams for an upcoming group project, but Zoe's name wasn't announced. The teacher was flustered by her mistake and quickly corrected it, but it was too late. Zoe knew Mrs. Thomas liked to put friends together. "Since I don't have any friends, she forgot me." Zoe didn't know why she didn't have any friends. Normally, it just made her sad inside, but today, she felt angry. After a bit, Auntie handed her an extra cookie and nodded toward the door. "Would you like to take your journal and go see if the garden can make you feel better? When I'm feeling this side of blue, it's the only thing I want to do." Zoe rolled her eyes at the corny rhyme and shrugged. "I guess so." She grabbed her journal, took a vicious bite out of the cookie, and walked out the door. The air smelled freshly of cut grass as she walked by, and she kicked the piles of grass clippings, spewing them all over the lawn. Kicking the heavy mounds felt good. She neared the garden, and her stomping turned into a walk when she came upon a row of strange flower clusters. The graceful, pale lavender flowers blossomed around a curved stem that made her think of fairy-sized fiddleheads. Shiny purple threads hung from the centers of the simple flowers like miniature chandeliers. They bloomed into a beautiful pattern as the fiddlehead shape uncurled itself. Zoe looked down the long row, and the individual flowers blurred into a lavender blanket. Insects of all description flew in and out of the flowers. The steady hum lulled her anger into something that she could tuck back inside. Quiet now, she sat on the grass and opened her journal to sketch the strange flower and its insect friends. Sketching things from nature usually made her happy, but not today. With no one around, the sadness moved into her eyes and tears flowed, blurring her vision, making splotchy drops on her paper. Suddenly, a giant bee buzzed past her ear, startling her. When it landed on the flower cluster right in front of her, she sat very still. She noticed a wide red stripe across its back and was jolted from her sadness when she realized she had never seen this kind of bee before. She grabbed her pencil, turned to a fresh page, and drew with quick, short strokes to capture the bee on her paper before it flew away. The giant bee seemed content to stay put and feed on each flower, moving up the stalk in a meticulous pattern. Zoe had plenty of time to study her new friend and barely looked up when Auntie quietly joined her. "Meet the red-belted bumblebee. She's kind of hard to draw without color," Auntie whispered, and handed Zoe a tin of colored pencils. Zoe was excited for the chance to add color to her drawing and smiled her thanks. She opened the tin, trying not to disturb her new bee friend. She found the red pencil first and colored in the bumblebee's special stripe. She added the yellows and the pinkish purple of the flowers. As she worked, thoughts about school faded. Her sadness ebbed and was replaced by her sense of wonder about the red-belted bumblebee and the strange flowers they fed on. "What are these weird flowers?" Auntie took a deep breath and smiled. Like magic, the garden had done wonders for Zoe's mood. "This is Phacelia, one of my favorite annuals," she said. "They're not very well known, but they're easy to grow, and the bees are crazy for them." With a buzz louder than one would have expected, the red-belted bumblebee took off and landed on another flower not too far away. Zoe noticed the bee was carrying little white saddlebags on her back legs. "What's wrong with her legs?" Auntie smiled. "Nothing at all. Remember when I started to tell you how pollen hitches a ride from the stamen of one flower to the pistil of another?" "Yes, sort of." "Well, that's pollen hitching a ride. Bees have special little hairs on their back legs to catch pollen grains when they feed on nectar from the flower. When she flies to the next flower, some of that pollen will get knocked off and stick to the top of the pistil of the new flower. When that pollen travels down the tube to meet with the seeds deep inside the ovary, that's called pollination, and without pollination, the seeds won't grow." "So that's why bees are so important," said Zoe. "Yes," said Auntie. "They carry pollen for a lot of our food plants. Without them, our world would not be the same, which is why I plant so many flowers to support them and other pollinating insects." On the top of her sketch, Zoe wrote, "Pollination. Pollen meets a seed and makes it grow. Bees carry pollen from plant to plant on their back legs." When she finished her notes, Zoe went back to watching the bumblebees at work with their wads of pollen clinging to their back legs. Bees don't have a choice about collecting pollen, do they? Auntie shrugged. "Not really, but this arrangement has worked for thousands of years and everybody wins. The flowers feed the bees, and the bees mix up lots of different pollen for the flowers. This mix of pollen is nature's way to make small differences in the next generation of plants that we call variations. Some plants can develop a variation that gives them a better chance at survival. Their seeds pass on the variation to help the plant adjust to changes in the environment over time." "You mean like climate change?" Auntie nodded. "Climate change is one of the reasons learning how to save seeds is so important. We can help plants adapt to changes by saving the seeds of the ones best suited to growing in the new climate. It takes years for plants to adapt, which is why it's so important to maintain our best varieties for the gardeners of the future who may need them." She took a deep breath. "That was a lot," she said. They both laughed, and Auntie shook her head and opened her journal. "Sometimes I get carried away. Let's see if we can make some sense of all that." "I think I got it," said Zoe, and wrote, "Variations. Small differences that help plants change over time." Zoe spent the rest of the afternoon watching the bees on the Phacelia. She tried to make her eyes keep wide with one bumblebee, but kept losing the single bee in the crowd of endless motion and activity. The bees went about their business and treated her as if she wasn't there, just like her classmates, she noticed. But coming from the bees, it didn't bother her at all. Another red-belted bumblebee landed on a flower in front of her. She held her breath, and time stood still as she slowly reached out her finger to touch the flower next to the bee. Without hesitation, the bee climbed onto her finger and walked right across her hand. It tickled, but Zoe held still. After a brief exploration, the bee realized there was no food to be found. It stopped and seemed to look up at her. then spread its wings and lifted off her hand. Zoe released her breath with a whoosh and watched her new friend fly to the next blossom. Zoe felt a warm glow inside her tummy. The bee noticed her, trusted her, and climbed onto her finger to be her friend. It gave her hope that maybe, someday, she could make a real friend.